So So I think we can go ahead. Well, wasting time because I know we all have a lot of commitment today. I don't know what happens to Oracle Mahmoud, who was on just about now. Let's try to reach in. Samson, are you there?
Oh, yes, I am. I'm here.
Okay, how are you doing, bro?
Fine, thank you. Happy Democracy Day.
Thank you very much. And we have our people who have joined us now. We're starting. So basically, this conference is all about COVID-19 and the urgency of electoral reforms in Nigeria. First, I would like to thank our and appreciate our invited panelists and speakers. For our attendees, those who have joined us, this is our maiden webinar under this project called Electoral Reform Project. The Electoral Reform Advocacy Project is actually sponsored by Usua Open Society Initiative for West Africa. And basically, our major goal is to ensure that we agitate the country and also able to reach out to the National Assembly to pass the Electoral Act 2010 Amendment Bill sponsored by Senator Obi Omagege, the Deputy President of the Senate, who is ably represented this afternoon. So I'm going to do the proper introduction, but it's good for me to give an overview that we are committed to ensure that we have good electoral reforms that can deepen our elections, that can guarantee free, fair, and credible elections. Today is June 12, which is Democracy Day. We had a broadcast of Mr. President this morning, where, and we have also heard from eminent Nigerians about the significance of June 12. And we believe that the only way we can actually honor this very important day is by calling for a very good and also for the elected National Assembly. And basically, we'll be hearing from our panelist speakers and also be taking questions from the attendees, that's our participants. This conversation is live on our Facebook page. And so thank you very much. My name is Ario Dari Atoye, the project lead for electoral reform advocacy and also an activist known in the country, trying to do our own little best. And we have our staff, have our friends all over the country. We have a lot of people who are also supporting this process. So I go straight to the introduction. First, let me introduce our speaker for today, our speakers. Number one, let me introduce Mabel Demokun. Mabel Demokun is representing, okay, Mabel, you want to say something?
Oh, no, hello everybody, good afternoon, thanks for having me. I guess we'll talk more in the course of
Absolutely. Yeah. Mabel is representing the Deputy President of the Senate, Senator Ovio Magege, and Mabel actually has a speech from the senator to deliver. We also have, and Mabel, sorry, is the Senior Special Assistant International and Interparliamentary, I think affairs, if I'm right, and wants to commend you for accepting our invitation. And let me also introduce our very good friend, it's a partner and a brother, it's a comrade and a friend and activist, by every right, Samson Itodo. Samson Itodo is the executive director, Yaga Africa. From Yaga, Nigeria to Yaga Africa, Samson is here. Samson has been involved, in deepening good governance for over a decade. Now they've been there, ensured everybody is aware of what we call it, the not young to run. It was their own brainchild, and they made a success of that. So we're happy to have Samson in the house. Thank you for actually accepting this invitation. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, and thank you.
So basically, we're expecting 2 more people to join us, but we can't wait. I'll be expecting Mr. Abdul Mahmoud to join us, and also Yemi Adamolegun also to join us. But in the meantime, we would definitely continue with this conversation. And I will yield the floor now to our speaker, our main speaker, Mabel Demokun, who is representing the Deputy Senate President, to probably do a little bit of introduction and also take it from there. We are all on standby to read from you. Thank you, Mabel.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a rare privilege, to represent my principal on this occasion. Though it's a webinar, but to be called up for such a duty is like a reassurance to you for his belief, in your capacity to deliver. So right now, I'm going to proceed to read his keynote address, and I implore you all to just assume that the next voice you'll be hearing will be that of His Excellency, the Deputy Senate President. Good afternoon, everyone. The Chief Executive and the entire membership of the Center for Advancement of Civil Liberties and Development, esteemed panelists, representatives of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, OSIWA, participants from all walks of life in this novel forum, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It gives me the utmost pleasure to be part of this event, a bold way of saying that in spite of all odds, we must continue to function as men and women of purpose and of action, who must do all it takes to move our country forward. Although we have made very good strides in our democracy, particularly in the electoral aspect and in the aspect of legislation, since the inception of the Order of Democracy in 1999, there's still a lot of work to be done. This is because the issue of free and fair election is very fundamental, and we can only be said to have gotten things right when the deluge of after-vote litigations and sometimes electoral violence that have plagued our elections and electoral processes would have been considerably reduced. This is in addition to a regime where a continually larger population of persons of voting age would be able to turn out for elections without let or hindrance. Perhaps, unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic seems to threaten all that. It is a settled fact that the COVID-19 pandemic experience will change the modus of doing business and of living life, including communication and all forms of transactions with high content of person-to-person contact. Elections and electioneering are one of such businesses. This is true of all nations. It is very true of the global community. It is even truer for this particular discourse. And for the same reasons, the information dissemination paradigm for both individual nations as well as the world stage. It is instructive that this particular conference is virtual, and it has already indicated the new way forward and the new normal life that we have embraced. In particular, it is a clear lesson that the COVID-19 pandemic is not just about how far the present impasse will last, or its likely reoccurrence as is being feared in some quarters, even within the science community. It is rather in the fact that the world needs to be wary of unguarded person-to-person contact, even for the fear of unknown future infections and contagious diseases. This is why there now appears to be a heightened global consciousness with regards to the new role of virtual technology in all forms of communication and information dissemination. In terms of a new electoral order going forward, it is the same. Maintaining the old order would leave us at the mercy of a lot of uncertainties, not just regarding public health and the health of voters, but the possibility of many persons getting disenfranchised by choice as they try to avoid contact with whatever infection. This will definitely undermine democracy. To this extent, many countries have had to postpone their elections to dates other than their original schedules, when perhaps the pandemic would have blown over. Nigeria, for instance, postponed some by-elections that would have held in Imo, Plateau, and Bayelsa states, which were originally scheduled for March 2020. Other elections in Africa moved from their original schedules. In Tunisia, South Africa, Gabon, Zimbabwe, and Gambia, Uganda, Botswana, Kenya, and Ethiopia. In the Americas, 14 countries postponed elections due to COVID-19. In Asia, 10 did. In Europe, 25 made postponements, while 6 did in the Oceania. In all 55 countries and territories, they all responded due to the COVID-19 scare. No matter the way we look at it, postponing elections could have negative implications for expressing the actual will of the people, as it could give the leeway for all kinds of manipulations. It could even sometimes undermine constitutionality. This is perhaps the reason that at the height of the present COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, Burundi on May 20th held this presidential election in what some media agencies seriously criticized as having observed no sign of social distancing. Scores of voters were seen standing in polling stations in Bujumbura and other parts of the country in close-knit clusters, with many not even wearing face masks, and there were likely no signs of any other form of caution. The COVID-19 infection implication of the event may never be known. As noted, well as nations are challenged by the prospects of disenfranchisement due to the fear of the pandemic-prone infections. The challenge is therefore in finding ways to join the global electorate best practice order, where virtual voting and electioneering are highly encouraged. Incorporating electronic voting in our electoral laws has been made a point of debate even before the current global challenge reared its head. And in this, we must distinguish between embracing technology and the real sense of electronic voting. In the current electoral law reform that is going on, it is indeed a challenge. To this extent, we are consulting far and wide, and the institution of the National Assembly is ready to do all that it needs to bring in opinion from all quarters to make sure that a proper legislation that is fit for all and free for all elections is adopted. And in these consultations, everybody is hoped to be carried along, including science, management, and political interest as well as other field of interest. The ultimate objective is that we should avoid disenfranchisement. In fact, encourage a wider interest in voting while containing whatever loopholes that may make rigging possible. Some of these frameworks have been tested in other climes using a wide range of artificial intelligence models to create acceptable electoral systems. We will get there. It is only a matter of how and when, and we hope to get there soon. It is for the above reasons that this type of discourse is central, it's germane, it's important for such a time as this. It is part of the needed consultation that will help drive the way forward. It is hoped that at the end of this webinar, useful resolutions will be arrived at that will help advise us in our efforts towards electoral reforms for our great country. I wish us all happy deliberations. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. That was the speech of the Deputy Senate President, His Excellency Senator V. Agege.
Well, thank you very much. Very short and straight to the point, and also very enriching, giving us a lot of examples, not just within Nigeria, but also across Africa. Once more, let me thank our speakers. Mr. Abdul Mahmoud has joined us. Mr. Abdul Mahmoud is the president of Public Interest Lawyers League. He's also one of our panelists, and he has just joined us. Yemi Adamolekun has also joined us. Yemi Adamolekun is the executive director of Enough is Enough campaign in Nigeria. Please, we are very happy to have every one of you, on board. I'm sure that Yemi and Samson were able to listen to the presentation of the Deputy Senate President. Let me just give you a little recap so that Mr. Mahmoud can be on the same page with us. The Deputy Senate President went, memory lane, talked about the concerns of the COVID-19, the fact that elections, it has affected the conduct of elections in different parts of the world, including our own country here. And he also said that everybody's input was taken in the process of having a very good electoral act that he has sponsored. So basically, I know our time is fast spent. We don't want to waste time. I will be asking first Samson to quickly respond before we go into some of our own questions from Center for Liberty, to quickly respond to that speech from the Deputy Senate President. Samson.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks, Mabel, for giving us an outlook of what our electoral process should look like. And what's happening across the region. Let me just say that I think that it's laid a solid foundation for our discussion this afternoon in relation to, first, what legal framework can we as a country have that deepens the integrity of our electoral process? Because the electoral process or its integrity is really critical for political legitimacy. And the fundamental point of reflection is, does political legitimacy mean anything to the present or contemporary Nigerian politician or the politician of the future? Because if political legitimacy doesn't mean anything and doesn't count, it means
Our problem with Samson's video, audio. Maybe Samson should try to reach us back again. And we're having problems hearing from
the state security architecture to secure power at all cost. So that's one sort of conversation.
Sorry, I think we're having a problem with Samson's.
Hello? I don't think it's working.
Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, Samson, we had problem with your network earlier. I don't know if you can quickly recap again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, what was the last thing you heard?
You're talking about legitimacy.
Hello, sir.
Oh, okay. So I was making the point about political legitimacy and whether political legitimacy matters to our current or contemporary Nigerian politician or the politician for the future. Because if it doesn't count or doesn't matter, people will use talks. The second point is about proceed. Maybe I can come back later.
I mean, hello, we are trying to get also Yemi to talk, but in the meantime, I think we've given an overview to Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. Let's hear from Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. Mr. Abdul Mahmoud. Hello.
Yes, I'm on. Good Nigeria. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Very well, very well.
Yes.
Yes, I said happy democracy to every Nigerian out there, to all my compatriots featuring on the conversation this afternoon. Unfortunately, I missed out on the introductory remarks of the representative of the deputy president, president of the Senate. Thankfully enough, my friend Samson has given some sort of foundation, some sort of prefatory remarks to some of the issues that have been itemized out in the statement of the deputy president of Senate. Samson talked about political legitimacy. The point is that legitimacy is at the heart of the. You cannot have legitimacy when you don't have a legal framework that fruits out the process in which representative democracy is built.
What's happening?
I'm minded by the fact that we're speaking against a backdrop that is rampaging the world, and more important, as COVID-19 enhanced the political legitimacy. If I have to borrow that phrase from from Samson Todo, how democratic institutions in the time of COVID-19. Is there a nexus between increasing disconnect between government and the governed in our country, and how did this disconnect interrogate the electoral process? We cannot have representative democracy without that process, that framework, that structure that allows every man and woman, every citizen of our country to cast his ballot at the polls. But that can only happen where there is a legal framework. Samson talked about political legitimacy. Political legitimacy is drawn from the ballot. But when you have Democrats that are not in themselves democratic, how do we now integrate the whole idea, the whole notion of political legitimacy? True, we have had cycles of elections in our country from 1960 to the last election in 2019. Don't forget we had an interregnum between 1984 and 1999. We have had legal framework, electoral framework that defines, that shapes the electoral process. But the is the point I've always made. Is there anything fundamentally wrong with our legal framework? I expected to run the root. Are people sophisticated enough to define the type of that that we elect? Where 7 high elections have become 5,000 naira, some less, some for a loaf of bread, to cast their vote for our politician. The problems we are having, are we dealing with a political culture, or shenanigans, to take place with. Happily, we are still to account some of the new and begin to pursue it in such a way that we can reroute or root, political legitimacy. Is it possible? From experience we will draw from COVID-19, for to have Nigerians always rebel, for example, somewhere across the one constituency in the far flung of our country, or Samson who is running for, the Senate in Benue State or whatever state it comes from, and all that. So my expectation is this: as we are agitating for electoral reform, we should be looking for a new legal framework that takes into account some of the experiences we are drawing from COVID-19. This is my preparatory remarks for now.
Sorry, thank you very much. I think it's really, really terrible today. Networks, different ends of Abuja. Something is in Abuja, Oracle is in Abuja, and it seems the network is terrible. Probably now we just have to be making use of 2, 3, networks, one way or the other, because I think we've been experiencing this in several webinars. I want Yemi Adamodekun is also with us. Please, Yemi, to also respond to the speech by the Deputy Senate President. Yemi.
Hi, given the network issues, I'm not starting my video because I don't know, I've had network issues today here as well. And I didn't hear, I heard a bit of what Samson said and a bit of what Mr. Mahmood and a bit of the speech. So I'm not going to respond. I'm just going to share a comment or two by the bit that I did hear. And what I heard Samson speak about is political legitimacy. And I think that's extremely important framing, because ultimately, if you don't believe, first of all, we don't have a threshold for elections. So if only 5 people show up and vote, whoever the 5 people voted for is the winner. We don't have that, a minimum percentage of people must show up for an election. So I think for me, that then frames that whole conversation of political legitimacy. So if politicians know what they do to get in, and we've seen it in various ways, from compromising who has access to voters' cards, politicians literally taking them, or colluding so that certain areas where you think, or certain types of people who you think might not vote for you, don't get their cards, so they don't vote, what's that called, disenfranchising a certain group of people. So the whole range of things that are at sort of the toolkit of politicians that they run during elections. And if that then is the case, what then gives me legitimacy, or who do I feel I'm accountable to, so to speak? And of course, within our context where citizens we're not taught, and we generally don't understand our rights and responsibilities, it then makes it very difficult to then hold said politicians accountable. So I think, yes, our laws, and it's been interesting to see how our laws have also evolved, because ultimately the people that you need to work the laws are the people who need the laws to work for them. So it's really quite interesting, but I think ultimately citizens need to drive it, because regardless of who's in the National Assembly, they were voted in and they owe a responsibility to the people that they represent. And I think therein lies the power of any electoral reform that we want to do, is citizens understanding that until they realize that this is their route to getting the type of people they want to serve them, then we will dance around a bit. So sorry, I'm not responding to anybody directly, but I'm just not going to try to pick half words and sentences. Thank you.
Thank you, Yemi. I know you have a lot of engagements today, so also most of our panelists a crowded day. But let me quickly ask Yemi one additional question. Is how do you think we can best approach electoral reform with the National Assembly? Because many had expected that this should be the in thing. Now we are going into off-season elections again without them actually, fast-tracking this process. How do you think we should go about this? What do you think is really the problem that they are not?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think it's tied to what I just said, political legitimacy. Because if you don't think that, and you owe anybody an explanation, what's the incentive for them to drive it? So to your point about thinking that they would, well, if it works for them the way it is, then it works for them the way it is. But again, back to what I said earlier, citizens just need to understand what it means. We don't, we talk about numbers, we talk about, do our votes really count? Yaga's done excellent work in trying to show numbers and trying to show demographics, trying to show what difference it makes if people actually do show up to vote. So I think ultimately that's where we need to drive the conversation. It's not, yes, there's a place, I mean, I guess also partly rooted in the work that I do, and that's where there's a balance needed in this work. In those who do advocacy internally with the National Assembly and have conversations with, for example, the Deputy Speaker and his team, or if it's the Speaker and his team. But then there's the need of citizens to just put pressure. I mean, we've seen it over the last week with sexual and gender-based violence and what the response to that has been. And that's literally just citizens speaking. It's not, yes, there was a bit of advocacy as well, sort of meetings. And when I talk about advocacy, I'm talking about meetings where we sort of sit around the table, sort of more sort of nicer, nicer conversation climbs. But also they also direct pressure that we're asking citizens to put on their representatives, sharing numbers and say, call them, call your representative and let them know that this is what I want, you represent me. So you can't, again, I mean, let me not even go too far. Infectious disease bill, we saw it on TV. Yaga hosted a town hall meeting, and we saw very clearly how we went from the Senate, yeah, thank you very much. He went from saying we will go ahead with what we want, and we've seen that in their posturing as well, from even to this point, that this is what we want and we want to go ahead, even though there's been a bit of backlash. We forced them to a public hearing, and then they're clapping for themselves that they decided to have a public hearing. But then by the end of the town hall meeting, he was a lot more subdued in the fact that we will go ahead, because he was forced to come into contact with citizens just saying, no, there are issues with this bill, and we're speaking. So I think for me, that's actually, I'll park it there. That example on national TV on a platform hosted by Iaga, Samson is here, showed very clearly what you have when politicians don't feel they owe their political legitimacy to the citizens who supposedly elected or didn't elect them.
Thank you very much, Yemi. First, let me acknowledge, I think I can see Ajay Amina Zakari. We just want to say thank you for joining us. We know you're not one of the panelists, but we know you are one of our good listeners this afternoon. Before I come to Mabel, let me go to the Oracle. Probably we can do away with our video. It's going to be affecting the network conversation. Let me quickly ask the Oracle. How best do you think? This is COVID-19 era. Ordinarily, we have been on the street telling the National Assembly to please make electoral reform a priority, pass Electoral Act 2010 Amendment Bill sponsored by Senator Omar Gigi, why are you doing this? But we don't have that. How do you think we can, we can best agitate the National Assembly? What are those things do you think we should do? Being an activist, a foremost activist yourself, because I believe that from what I've heard from all the speakers, this is something that we actually need. INEC has said it is committed to electoral reform and the Electoral Act amendment, the quick passage of it. Stakeholders say they are committed. We are asking the ORAP, what do you think we can do, in this situation that we find ourselves? I'm coming to.
If you can hear me, a lot of people out there are worried if I'm driving. No, I'm not driving. I'm heading towards a program, but I'm parked somewhere safe in the premises of my office. Speak to all Nigerians. I will also answer for electoral reform. Are they convenient with the quasi-called political legitimacy that they enjoy at the moment? Legitimacy, quote unquote, that was won on the basis of some of the shenanigans that happened at the electoral poll, 2015, and of course 2019, people selling their vote. My answer to my question would be no. One of two levels. One, the legitimacy you enjoy from the party you belong to, whose ticket you win to present yourself before the larger electorate pool. We'll see what is happening at indirect election. The powers that be of the party sitting in Abuja insisting that they need indirect election. There appears not to be a consensus within the party itself, and that goes to the heart of legitimacy within the party. Here now we'll be asking if the All Progressive Congress is a political party, what are its members saying in respect of the governorship primaries that will be coming up in Edo State? We don't seem to know. That is at one level. At the other level, the larger political legitimacy would draw the Nigerian see legitimate. That's another proof of law that manner is where somebody openly shown fled, somebody was declared the governor of that state and all that. We saw the violence that attended the poll, the polling Kogi. But for some nexus between our agitation for electoral reform, look, let's get it. If we don't have true electoral reform, we cannot have proper elections. And if we don't have proper elections, we cannot have those we have elected who are our true representatives. The other day, a senator sat in the chambers of the National Assembly and called for the slashing of salaries of public servants and workers in our country. If it were elsewhere, a senator who understands his nuance, who understands the fact that whatever he says will affect his chances at the poll, we don't make such an uninformed call. It is because in our country today, people go to the polls because they are committed to power, they win elections. And that is why I think that we should create some sort of connection between our agitation in the fringe, those are called the ambivalent order, and those who run our political system. We should begin to educate them that electoral reform is for everybody.
Hello, at the Oracle. Hello, Mr. Mahmood. I think the network is. We have to come back to Mr. Mahmood later and
that
hello, Mr. Mahmood. I think the network is bad, and it would have been really, really nice to hear all that you're saying, and because a lot of our participants are actually very much interested in your conversation. And I don't know if we still have Samson, if Samson's network is okay now, probably we can hear from Samson to make his submission. And in addition to that, Samson should also tell us how CSOs can work together with people like Mabel and his boss, and the people and the National Assembly, how we can work together with them and have this Electoral Act bill passed this year, because it will be significant. This is 2020 if we have a new law. And I'm going to ask Mabel one question, because I heard that it's like the National Assembly is trying to do what we call a repeal and reenact, so that we have a brand new law, so that we won't be having Electoral Act amendment, Electoral Act 2010 as amended, just like we have with our Constitution, that they're also considering that option. But I will allow Samson to speak first, then before we come to that, to that aspect of this conversation, and I'm sure maybe we'll have something to tell us. So Samson, please, how can we work together? What are those specific things? E-collation, full biometrics. I want you to speak in general perspectives, to this. We don't have the luxury now of trying to break down these questions because of the network. We wanted to have a proper conference conversation, but the network is actually proving very difficult now. So probably we just have to get the conversation going either way. So let's hear from Samson.
Sorry, where is this again? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Samson, yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, so thanks, Atoye, for those thoughts. And I heard what the previous speakers have said. What can we as civil society do together? As at today, we are 965 days to the 2023 elections. Today, June 12th. The National Assembly may proceed, well, typical of the legislative calendar, will proceed on the annual legislative recess, probably around the end of July or August, and won't return until September or maybe October. It depends. We don't know yet. So it means 2 months out. And when they come back in September, the focus will be the appropriation, the 2021 Appropriation Act. And given that COVID-19 already disrupted our national life, we expect that lots of things that were planned were going to be disrupted. Some may have to be moved to 2021. What that tells us is we're already racing against time, and two, we need to put this discourse on the front burner of the legislative agenda for this year. If you are 965 days to the 2023 elections, it means party congresses for 2023 will start sometime around March of 2022. Now, between 2022, if it's March, then you have 2 months, and then you have 12 months. So we're somewhere around about 14 months before party congresses start. What that tells us is we're already late on electoral reform. So we should declare this a national emergency if we're very serious and committed to credible elections. The second point is For civil society, we need to be very, very clear. So far, there are about 3 or 4 different agenda on electoral reforms. The National Assembly, even though both chambers have their own agenda, we will look at the National Assembly's agenda as one. You look at INEC also has its own agenda on electoral reforms. Citizens or civil society need to have their own agenda. How we ensure we build national consensus on some issues around one, how do we deepen the integrity of our elections and our democratic institutions? So INEC, political parties, the judiciary, or our security agencies, very, very critical. The second, how do we ensure that we open the space for voters to cast their votes? It is very, very critical. So we need to rejig this system of voter registration as well as accreditation and voting. The third is about electoral technology. How do we increasingly deploy technology for our elections? Yes, the current proposal permits electronic voting, but the fundamental truth, and I made this point at another webinar yesterday. I'm talking about electoral reforms, and I said that, to be very honest and to be frank, between now and 2023, I doubt if we are ready to deploy electronic voting for 2023, quite honestly, except I don't even see that happening. What we should focus on for 2023 is, do we perfect our system of voter accreditation, electronic accreditation, and electronic transfer of results? And then from 2027, begin to think about electronic voting. And the reasons are quite abound. One is the cost of elections. Even the manual process that we have adopted is very, very costly. And if you look at the whole discussion around voting amidst COVID-19, there are several prohibitive costs that we need to look at. The second point is about the deployment and the procurement of these machines themselves. Do we have all the time? Because to deploy electronic voting for a large country like Nigeria requires you to introduce this incrementally. And you're only going to have about about 5 governorship elections before the general elections. Two this year, 1 next year for Anambra, and then the 2 Ekiti and Osun. So I don't think that we can deploy electronic voting for 2023. Let's try electronic transmission. And I've given reasons for that. What we can do now is, how do we fix the laws? Let's fix the laws, create that regime, give INEC the latitude. So whenever we are ready to deploy them, then we can deploy those machines. Let's not forget the vulnerability of those machines. As Raila Odinga will say, that what we don't want are computer-generated leaders. The manual process that we have adopted now, where we see the ballot paper, we see the result sheet, we don't trust it. Is it when we automate our voting systems that we will trust the system? Electoral trust is not blind trust. People need to see there's a difference between elections and I can go on, because the political culture itself and the context for which these elections are conducted really informs what needs to be adopted. And the last part is about electoral justice. Our judiciary, as presently constituted, is a shame, and we need to ensure that to guarantee the independence of our judiciary so it delivers electoral justice. But the current judiciary that we have today, I doubt if they have the courage to deliver electoral justice. And there are several things that can be done to the legal framework to revisit that. And this is what civil society really needs to rally around. There is need to build consensus, but to the point Yemi said, honestly, citizens should not bequeath the responsibility of demanding electoral reform to NGOs. NGOs are hegemonic constructs. Citizens should rise up. And I love what's happening with the sexual and gender-based violence, or also what happened with the Not Too Young to Run. It was about citizens. EIE has published phone numbers. Pick those phone numbers, knock on their doors. They are your employees. Don't always look at NGOs. NGOs have their own agenda. They have their own issues that are bothering them. They're also human beings as well. But let's not abdicate that responsibility to just NGOs. And NGOs also need to recognize that if we are speaking, let us speak for the people and not speak for ourselves because we work in this space.
Thank you very much, Samson. It's a full package from you and very good submission. We totally agree with you. We're already late, and I believe that Mabel is going to respond to that. Thank God we're having Mabel here, who is the representative of not just the DSC, but the entire National Assembly. We're already late. That's one big thing that you have to take back to the National Assembly, Mabel. Yeah, Samson said that, look, it's going to be difficult for us to have e-voting. Even me, I believe that. But what about e-transmission and full biometrics? And from the bill proposed by Senator Ovio Magigi, yeah, we've seen biometrics, that's accreditation, e-accreditation. But issue of e-transmission is missing. So we want Mabel to respond to this and some of the things you heard from other speakers. And I want our other speakers to please also wait for this after Mabel has finished speaking. Is we from Center for Liberty are proposing something, all elections in one day, because we believe it's going to guarantee credible election, reduce costs, also. We want our panelists and speakers to actually weigh in on this if it's something that we should, it's a path that we should actually take. So Mabel, please, let's have your reaction and what's your contribution on the issue of e-transmission of results, even if we can achieve e-voting in the meantime. Thank you, Mabel.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, very well, Mabel.
Thank you. I've listened to all the speakers, and I'm really, really impressed, with everything they've had to say. Samson's submissions, have been of serious implications to my responses. And I also listened to the oracle, like you called me, and his submission, and Madam Yemi as well. I don't know where to start because we have a potpourri of ideas and all that. You have raised plenty issues. But let me start by saying that the electoral reforms that we're trying to drive by the bill that was sponsored by His Excellency, the Deputy Senate President, is going to be divided into like two parts. That's what it seems like, because there's a bill sponsored on one hand to amend the Electoral Act as it stands. Then there's another bill that stipulates punishment, for electoral offenses that seeks to create the Electoral Offenses Commission. We're trying to harmonize, those bills, and like what you said, like what Atoye said about having a comprehensive bill. We're now trying to harmonize to have a comprehensive, because both bills have passed second reading in the Senate, and we have a similar bill also on electoral reforms from the House of Reps. So we're trying to have a comprehensive, that is my understanding, that we're trying to have a comprehensive single bill, single legislation, going forward, that will guide the electoral process in Nigeria, from now. And there was a stakeholders conference in March, I think the first week of March, thereabout in Lagos, and we rose from that meeting. But the Deputy Senate President himself was in attendance. The co-sponsors of the other bills and other members from the House of Reps, co-sponsors from the Senate were Senator Kiari, Senator Kabir Gaya as well. Others in attendance were Senator Ekwe Madu. Senator Ekwe Madu played pivotal roles in the review of the electoral laws in the last 12 years. Was there, Senator Teslim Folarin and the others. So there was a consensus that was reached, sort of, to have a comprehensive single document. And we've been working, in serious collaboration with some senior members of the INEC. They've submitted the INEC's position, the INEC's agenda, what they look forward to having in the new reforms, and we have put everything together. The submissions of Professor Bianu, Madam May Agbamuche Umbu, and some other persons that we have been working with. We have everything put together. So now, I don't know if there are particular or specific areas that you want me to speak to, because those are like bulky documents, but I agree, and I agree with you touching on the question of electronic voting and automating, introducing technology, to the electoral process in Nigeria. There are two distinct issues. There are two distinct questions. And our bill, the first bill that sought to amend the electoral law, is seeking to introduce or properly recognize the introduction of technology and the use of technology in our electoral process, especially as the issue of the card reader, for instance, has gone up and down through the court system, from the lowest to the topmost echelon in the Supreme Court. We want to formally use these amendments to recognize the card reader, for instance. That's like the central innovation of the bill. There are so many other things, in the bill, so many other technological introductions. We are going to be using technology, going to be using technology in the area of accreditation of voters, and so on and so forth. But I want us to recognize that this bill, it is not within the contemplation of this bill to seek a process that will allow for electronic voting stricto sensu, the way we are thinking in our minds of like e-commerce or something, where you can just sit in your house and cast a ballot. I don't think that's not what we're driving, and I don't think we're ripe for that, because even in America and some other advanced countries, it is the practice that even when you want to cast your vote, even if you're going to be interacting with machines and all of that, you still have to leave your house to go to a proper polling booth. Even if you're going to be dispensing with the use of paper and all that, that's one of the objectives of the bill, to do away with paper trail and all that, and to give more legitimacy, to the process. But we're not talking about for at least for 2023 elections and this particular amendment, to the extent of my understanding, we're not talking about electronic voting like in e-commerce, where everybody will be in their houses and vote. But the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown up new challenges, and we have to we must continue to consult and collaborate going forward. I will implore all of us to take more to take active parts, like as followers, in more activism, to put forward our contributions whenever we're asked to, especially when it comes to public hearings. This time, to surprise you that we have a Samson Itodo, and I've seen him severally in the National Assembly, on 2-3 occasions in the last 3-4 years. I think I have, but I've not been paying attention years before. But I mean, the wealth of knowledge out there, people don't bring it in when we're talking about legislations that would affect the public. There are so many times I've made some posts and all of that, and discover that people don't come forward with their strong reasons. Some of these bills, sometimes we need input from people, from members of the public, to be able to, give what the true state of the law is, when incorporating such changes and such reforms. So that is one leg of the argument. And also, I was going to talk about, I think something said something about electoral justice. Yeah, so that will talk about the second leg of the reforms we are trying to introduce. There are a plethora of electoral offenses that have not been punished in Nigeria. In fact, the Electoral Offenses Commission, is born out of the need to punish people for taking Nigerians for granted. Pardon me, and allow me to digress a little. Today is June 12th, for instance, and we're celebrating the essence of democracy as it ought to be. The essence of the June 12th celebration itself, when you leave the veil and you look at it, stricto sensu, is about the sanctity of a vote. It's about how people are allowed, to exercise their suffrages or exercise their ballots or exercise their to show their interest in the kind of leader they want, without any form of encumbrance. So bringing that back home, there's a need, for all of us, to come back to the table and network and collaborate on some of these things. On electoral justice, like I was saying, this new bill on punishment of electoral crimes and all of that, has made provisions extensively to cover all sorts of electoral offenses. But more importantly, when he talked or he spoke about the judiciary, there is now going to be punishment for those who deliberately truncate who do not deliver electoral justice, or who deliberately truncate the will of the people. And that has not been in existence before now. There are so many other, there are so many other innovations, that will punish. In fact, even the constitution of a tribunal, of an election petition tribunal, is going to be taken out of the heads of the jurisdiction of heads of court, the arbitrary appointments and all of that. It's a holistic reform that we have planned, and I will enjoin all of us to maybe do a clause by clause assessment of all of these things that we have planned. And let's think about it, that some of our Nigerian leaders, we should stop casting blanket aspersions. I have been in the system, and I know that some persons actually mean well. Those persons should be supported. Those dreams should be supported. And from a place of knowledge, when we walk in house, we will be able to disabuse our minds and be able to support whatever it is we're trying to do to make sure that elections and the electoral process in Nigeria, is free and fair for all. And one that will be able to confer the legitimacy that Samson started speaking about. I hope I'm not out of time. So that's what I have to say. Yeah. Except we have specific questions now.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sorry, can I? One last thing. Can you hear me? Please go ahead. I can't hear you anymore. Hello? Hello?
Okay. Yeah. Let me thank you. Yeah, we're still going to come back to you, Mabel. We're going to come back to you on single day election that we feel that is very important. We want to hear from others our own We'll come back to you on that. On the issue of the key aspects of electioneering in Nigeria, and I think there seems to be sort of a consensus that probably we don't need e-voting now, but issue of e-accreditation. What is missing in that bill that will not voting but e-transmission of results? When results are ready, how you are able to send it as a collation officer almost immediately to the INEC servers, so that either in Abuja or at the state level, they are seeing the results as people are, in order to eliminate the rigging that usually takes place between the voting center and with the ward or local government collation. So I'm sure you will respond to that. So basically, let's quickly go to, I don't know if we still have Abdul Mahmoud to speak to us about the issue of having all elections in one day. From us, we've done a little bit of analysis. We believe that if we have all our elections in one day, it will cause rigging. You're going to have the presidential election, governorship election, the National Assembly election. And sometimes somebody will have interest, some talks will have interest in presidential, they will not have in House of Assembly. So it becomes so difficult for you to go and disrupt election. So, well, it's also going to be issue of costs, security and other considerations. But we want to hear from our speakers how far-reaching is that in terms of having all elections, in one day, considering even what we are witnessing with COVID-19, that we can no longer afford to spend too much, on election. We also believe that we can have 3 elections in one day: presidential, House of Reps, Senate. We can have 5, which in addition to governor and House of Assembly. So let's start from Mr. Abdul Mahmoud, if he's still with us, the Oracle.
Yes, I'm still with you, Dare. Thank you very much for having me back. My position on a single day election is very
Okay.
View of the cost effectiveness
Hello, Mr.
of
Abdulmamu, can you hear us?
returning elections to
Abdul Mahmoud, the Oracle, please, can you hear us? Your network is terribly bad, it's breaking, people cannot hear you. And while probably we'll also give a little bit of time to Abdul Mahmoud if we're able to actually get him to speak, even if it is just going to be for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, we'll really love that. Let me quickly go to Yemi. We want to learn from EIE, and like we said, these are our own suggestions. We want to learn from a lot of persons, experts going forward, because this is going to probably be, an advocacy that we really have to engage INEC and National Assembly on, but we want to hear, from you. So let's hear from Yemi what's our own opinion on. These are our suggestions. I don't know if Yemi is still there. I think she's having network issue too. Let's quickly jump to Samson. I'm sure when Yemi is ready, she will let us know. Samson, we are advocating a single day election, and we want to hear from you. You are an expert in this field. IAGA deploys thousands of observers every year in in elections, states and national level. And we know how important is this, in terms of electioneering in Nigeria. Should we have a single day, bringing everything together? We believe that we can do that. So we want to hear your opinion on this, how far-reaching and this, is this, and how important it is to curb the issue of violence, rigging. Samson.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Just to say that
We can hear you.
Okay, just to correct an impression, I'm not an expert. I'm a student of elections. So let me just put that out. The second point about a single day for elections, I think this is a demand that has been there in the public. Because if you look at the cost of elections, now, the larger percentage of the cost of elections is, or the money spent on elections, it's on personnel and overhead. So we have sometimes for general elections, INEC would deploy close to 1 million ad hoc staff. These staff are paid training allowance, and this training allowance, well, I don't use pay, is a stipend that is provided, because ad hoc work for elections is actually voluntary national service to a large extent. So I won't call it payment. But they get their training allowance, they get their transportation, and on election day, INEC also have to pay them as well. So if you look at on the logistics front, quite frankly, it is cost effective to have elections on one day. Because in that case, you're not deploying officials for 2 days of elections, or you're also not expending resources for the transportation of election materials. there's just a lot. So I think that if we're really interested in cutting down the cost of elections, we can have all our elections in one day. What does that entail? It just simply means 5 ballot papers in one particular election for the presidential, for the Senate, for the House of Reps, for governors, and then for state House of Assemblies in this particular case. So it is doable. I think it would also reduce tension. It will, to a very large extent, also help in the management of election logistics. Yeah, it may be cumbersome because you have 5 ballot papers. You're going to spend more time. But if you look at the resources that we expend, if you look at the kind of manpower that we need, if we host our elections on one day, I think we'll be better for it. I support that, as opposed to having elections in 2 days, first presidential and National Assembly elections, and a second day for state level elections. We can consolidate this. We shut down the entire country when we are having elections on election day. So it's like two days in 2 weeks, where the entire country is shut down. There's restriction of movement. I don't know why we need to do that if it's not the nature of our politics. And I think the politicians are at the heart of this. They are the cause of our problems. They are the cause of our problems. If we cannot have elections in one day, it's because politicians will not allow INEC, will not allow citizens exercise their franchise in a free and peaceful environment. And we're having this conversation because we come to electoral reforms. We come to this discourse with a mindset that our politicians, given their true nature, will do everything to undermine the process because they want power at all costs. But it won't take anything from us if we have elections in one day. And that's my view. I think it's something that we should push for. It would also, this whole bandwagon effect that we talk about in sequencing of elections. We know how before the 2019 elections, it was a very controversial issue, changing the sequence of elections. Put all of them in one day. Intensify your voter education. Political parties have failed in their responsibility of mobilizing voters and educating them. We leave the responsibility to INEC. And that's why I said that by design, we have a structural defect in our electoral process. And what we're trying to grapple with is just how do we disrupt and restructure the process? You lump a lot of responsibilities on the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission is responsible for voter education. The Electoral Commission is responsible for prosecution of electoral offenses. The Electoral Commission is responsible for registration and regulation of political parties. The Electoral Commission is responsible for organizing election. Just one institution. So you can see structurally, we have programmed the Electoral Commission in such a way that it will spread itself so wide that it cannot provide that oversight that is required of some components of our electoral process. So that this whole unbundling, good thing there is a bill, Amida talked about the bill on electoral offenses, tribunal, electoral offenses commission. I think the time is now, to have that commission. Those are my views, but I strongly support it. Is whether our politicians will agree is another thing.
Thank you very much.
But we can force them to agree.
I agree. And that's what Center for Liberty is all about, actually, to put pressure on these politicians. It's just that now COVID-19 has given them some leeways in terms of hiding in their chambers. They have been coming every day to knock at their door and demanding for this. And we won't be disturbing Mabel anyway, we'll be disturbing the DSP and our lawmakers. Basically, I enjoyed the contribution of Samson on this, because I can tell you that our team here where I am are very excited to hear that we have a very solid partner, Iaga Africa, who believes that we should have all our elections in one day. And we'll be doing this, this advocacy not only with IAGA to also put pressure on National Assembly, but also INEC, because we know very well that it is the responsibility of INEC to fix the date of election. but INEC and the National Assembly can definitely have a meeting point to have this inserted in our constitution. Yeah, the dates will determine, but let us have all our elections in one day. And also, it's going to reduce something. The problem of the problem we experienced between the Saraki-led Senate, that's the 8th Senate, and the president, when there was this issue of which election comes first. Is it the National Assembly? Is it the presidential election? Then having all elections one day will be taken care of with this kind of concern. So please, we want to like to have Yemi. I believe Yemi is still with us. If Yemi is still with us,
yes, like I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Yemi, please.
What would you like? Sorry, the network has been off, so I've been half in here. So what would you like me to talk about?
Yeah, basically, all elections in one day. Something spoke extensively on it. I agree with us that look, even with this COVID-19 problem, we can't spend much now on our elections. And we from Center for Liberty, we believe that having all elections in one day will not only guarantee credibility, reduce costs, but also issue of rigging, and also the forward and back between the president, the executive, and the legislative hand, which election should come first. All this will be addressed. And also observers that have to come into the country to spend 2 weeks interval simply because they have to monitor elections. You know, it's going to be a win-win for everybody. That's our own view, but we want to hear from TIE, what's your take on having all elections in one day in 2023?
Oh, great. Thank you. I agree. I mean, I think, as Samson said, from a cost perspective, I think it works. Secondly, ability to manipulate, because part of sort of the analysis of one person, if you win this one or this one works out this way, or people turn out is another thing, for example. So I think maybe those 3 things is where I'll put it. One, the cost to us as a country. As he said, we literally shut down the country to hold elections, where in other climes people just vote and keep it moving. But because of our distrust of the system and the ability that movement allows in manipulating the system, we literally need to shut down, at least I would say for the foreseeable future, for elections, so that it's contained and we have it. I mean, off-cycle elections, we already know the challenges that we have in that space. So yeah, I'd support it. But Samson said something earlier that I picked up on that I thought was really quite interesting around electronic voting. And the whole idea of let's even master sort of electronic, the INEC parses it in 3 different stages so that it's the whole gamut of that's electronic voting. People just tend to think of the either voting, like we like to say, vote via SMS or vote with a machine as just electronic voting. But it's the whole process, and we're sort of halfway through it. So I think Samson's point, if I heard him correctly, was basically master where we are now, that everybody's comfortable with it, it's not contested in court, and then we can then go to the actual technology bit of the voting part of it. And I completely agree with that. And we've moved from voting day fraud, or not voting day fraud, like actual voting fraud at the point where you vote, to now collation center fraud. So if we're able to master those 2 processes, so to speak, and do those electronically. I mean, INEC, for example, till today, 1 year after an elections, we don't have results per polling unit. And that's something that was a big song and dance. We filled the big paper. It's something that knows all the names for this thing. I tease you. I don't. I just know the work they're supposed to do. So we fill in all this big paper. They're supposed to stick on a wall as polling units. Some CSOs were doing pictures so that we could share and confirm with. But if you take a picture of a polling unit and you don't then release the results for the polling units, what am I comparing it to? Then what then is the essence of it? Because the idea of it is if I take a picture and almost in real time, it can be shared that this is what INEC had recorded, then it's much easier to contest where things went wrong. But you arrive at the collation center and things have changed. Some results were nullified, but were not really nullified. Some changed them on the road, then we go to court. Because your law says that once you have declared results, it is only in court that you can overturn that. And with the way our judiciary, unfortunately, has been compromised, that works in the favor of politicians. And I hear you, Mabel, you're quite right, and I do agree with you, that there are good people that we should work with and support. That's why I said that the gamut ranges for advocacy sort of sitting down and talking around the table to protest and really pushing citizens. And this ties with Ario's point around how COVID has stopped us from knocking on the doors of the legislators. And I say, no, not at all. It's kind of similar to the analogy that I use with churches, when people say, oh, churches are being closed. Churches were not closed, their buildings were closed. If you're anybody of faith or even a Muslim, the fact that your mosque is closed should not stop your faith. If it does, then we need to have a conversation about your faith. If your faith is tied to a building or a man or a woman, as the case may be, that's a different conversation entirely. So if the buildings are closed, yes, let the buildings be closed so lives can be saved. And yes, let COVID stop movement or stop, in a sense for me, stop protest. But let me not say not stop protest, stop large protest. But I literally can organize 20 people in my community and go to the front of my local government chairman's house or my state house of assembly member's house, because they are supposed to represent me. And for me and for my team at EIE, that's what we're really excited about in this season. And as I said earlier, we've seen it with the sexual and gender-based violence actions in the last 2 weeks. Citizens literally saying, oh, I can actually call this dude. And then calling their representatives and feeling like they have voice to ask questions. So for me, that's the exciting part of that. So yes, as CSOs that rally people, we might not be able to physically move, but I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to work with our networks to empower citizens to understand the issues. So it's not, and I mean, if anyone knows me, my friends know, they don't call me to complain about Nigeria's problems. Because you have a phone. So if you're not donating to EIE's work and giving us money to do this work, you cannot call me and ask me what is EIE doing about it. Because your hand is not broken, neither is your mouth, neither is your eyes, neither is your brain. So we have to take personal responsibility for the parts that we can. And yes, I recognize that not everybody can either protest or do various things. But the ones that you can do. You have a House of Rep member, call, send a text message that, oh, you represent me, I'm concerned about this, I'm concerned about that. And I think that's the opportunity we have. But then to get citizens to act, we then have a responsibility to educate. Mabel talked about clause-to-clause comparison. Yes, for those of us in the space, that's what we can do and understand. But for a citizen, I'm not reading any clause-to-clause comparison of anything. It's not giving me food, it's not feeding me, it's not helping my life. However, if I'm able to identify, or we are able to identify 2, 3, 4 key points that we think citizens can drive, and then we give them that information and explain how it ties to, oh, our vote don't count, oh, the politicians have manipulated, the complaints that we have. If we know those are the touch points of citizens, then let's find things within this electoral reform process that can resonate very easily for them to take action. So even if it's on 2 things we get them calling about, then it would facilitate the teams like IAGA and Center for Liberty that then want to do advocacy around, but look, however many thousands of citizens have signed that these 2 things are important to them, let's talk about it. I hope I made some sense, but yeah. And then, and the last thing, also the thing about cost, because we've also made our elections very procurement heavy. And when it comes to government and procurement is equal to, I saw someone write corruption. So the easier we can make the system, so it's less of needing to buy, the easier it is for all of us. So results are sent electronically, we see it in real time. So as they're coming through dashboard that everybody can see, I'm not quite sure why even if that's what we mail, that will make a significant impact in our elections. I mean, the whole PDP argument was based on a server and numbers. So that tells you the power of, if everybody could actually see the numbers, how much drama we will have saved ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yemi. Wonderful submission from you, very enriching. And you see, I must also agree with what Mabel said about something that the National Assembly is also looking forward to CSOs, to enrich them with knowledge. And she also challenged us about something that we probably in the civil society, in the NGO, we're not doing enough in terms of educating the populace about some specifics and some of the things we're doing. And I believe that EIE is doing a lot. I receive EIE's email every week. I mean, IAGA Africa is doing a lot. But we have a lot of CSOs, and this country is a country of, almost 200 million in population. So I believe that probably what we need to do is also to continue to build networks, expand, to find a strategic way of putting pressure on the National Assembly to do what works. So I will quickly go to Mabel before I come back to Yemi, because there is one specific question I also want to ask from Yemi. Is you've heard about the need for us to have all elections in one day. And I'm sure that Mabel will also going to be part of the internal arrangement, collating views. We don't know the date that we're going to have the public hearing. This bill has gone through second reading. Probably you can let us into, for us to have an idea what is actually going on. Why are we not having the public hearing so soon? Do you think, from your own viewpoint, do you think the National Assembly will be disposed to us having elections in one day? So maybe please let's hear from you here.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming back. I would say I wouldn't want to be quoted on this because it's out of what I was asked to talk about. I never received this question, so I can't say that. I can't say whether or not the National Assembly will adopt this very noble idea. It looks good, all the advantages have been stated, but I can't, it's not for me to say. This is, and matters like this would have to go to debates, would have to go to a lot of things to be considered. As a private citizen, yes, if I had the magic wand, I would say we should do all our elections on one day, but it's not for me to say right now. Now, speaking about the stage of, or the stages of both bills, both bills are passed second reading, and they were at the committee stage. And I was talking to you about a stakeholders conference that held in Lagos in the first week of March. We rose from that meeting with, the anticipation that we're hitting the ground running. And I think the public hearing was to be slated for sometime in April, but COVID-19 happened, towards the end of March, and here we are. Even the National Assembly itself, had to stagger sittings. They went on a break for like 2-3 weeks, depending on whether the House of Reps or the Senate. Immediately after that, then they had to have one sitting per week. They only just reverted to having their normal 3 sittings per week, sitting days per week, this week, just this past week. So there's still a lot of work to be done internally. So I will ask questions when we, after this meeting, I will ask questions about a new date, if we have a new date, and we will definitely communicate that. And the DSP is very passionate about this bill. So I can assure you that something will be done as soon as possible on getting the public hearing, slated or scheduled. This bill is also very important because the National Assembly is driving at this time the constitutional review process. I know that is also domiciled in his office, and there are some things that if we must drive, like this single election, single day election, somehow might have some constitutional implications we'll have to also have to look at as well. So this process is not something that is a front burner issue. It's not something that will be handled with levity. It has not been handled with levity, and it will never be. It's a very germane issue, and it's very important and pivotal to the deliverables too, for legislators and what they can achieve in the course of their, service to Nigerians. So this is a very serious issue, and I can get back to you on the date, but I don't have a date right now because of the COVID-19 thing. And we're even, the workforce, I think, was scaled down to about 40% or so. So it's not easy to give you a date right now. I'll get back to my principal, then we'll talk about we'll talk about the committees in charge and all that. Then whatever consultations are going to be made, I'll get to you as soon as possible. So to support, about whether or not I support the single day election thing, I will bring it again before my boss. I would discuss it with him. But to me, on a personal note, I would endorse it. But we should be guided that by whatever measurements, the elections will only be held for now, based on the extant laws, and that is the handicap. Elections will only be held or organized by INEC within the confines of legislation, and what we have now, is the way it is. So we hope that the reforms will come sooner than later. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miguel. And gradually coming to the end of this webinar, and probably this should be the last contributions from Yemi, Samson, and Mabel. So let me quickly put this across to Yemi before Samson. I know Samson, Yaga is planning something also major, I think the end of this month, on issue of electoral reform. And I want to ask Yemi, we need to work together as CSOs, coalitions, and probably you should advise us the best way for us to do it. Should we look at specific items, in the bill, and we have a coalition sign on to it? Because there are times when we have a meeting point, we agree, we sign on to a single document so that we can have a strategic way of putting pressure on the National Assembly. We know it worked with the social media bill, and if we can use that kind of strategy, in terms of these electoral act amendments, such that we have some specific provisions in that bill that we just want to stick to. What we like to say, to that, and how can we go, about it? Probably you should advise us.
So honestly, I would really defer to Samson on that, because they've just simply done a lot more work. On the electoral space, we've tended to focus on getting citizens engaged. So EIA's election campaign is called RSVP, so register to vote. S, select credible candidates, and we are quite a reflection of the work that we've done in the space. We're the only civil society organization that has a track record of debates of any civil society organization in Nigeria since, I would make bold to say, since independence. Because from 2011, when we started, we were very clear about the importance of debates. So we've hosted debates of very different formats, on live TV, with candidates, on radio, using youth representatives of political parties when their principals don't show up. And not just at the federal level, we've done state governorship debates, we've done National Assembly debates. So that area, we've really focused a lot of energy and resources in just building that culture that if you want to lead a people, you must be able to defend what you plan to do. And we've seen different states respond quite differently to that. Lagos has, over time, built a culture as well. There's now almost a calendar in Lagos State of certain debates that happen that different organizations host, that if you want to be governor of Lagos State, you must show up at. And we hope that that continues across the country and indeed at the federal level. At the federal level, we haven't had a very serious debate since, I think, actually, no, that had all the major candidates. We haven't actually. I was trying to think, but every time I think about it, I remember that somebody didn't show up. So the last one, Atiku didn't show up. The one before that, it was Jonathan that didn't show up, and Buhari was there. Even got, last year, we decided to do a debate of the alternatives. So all the alternative candidates were at the debate and they all showed up, Fela Durotoye, Sowore, and all of that. Just because we believe in the power of it and we continue to push it and invest in that space. Then V is vote on election day. And then P is protect your vote. And that's what feeds into our Office of the Citizen campaign, that you protect your vote on election day, but also in the 4 years in between by holding them accountable. So that's what EIA really has focused on. But in terms of the sort of the legal bit of which electoral reform comes with, I would defer to Samson around the sort of nitty-gritty of that. But as I said earlier, I think a big part of it rests with citizens, and also pushing INEC in the things that is within INEC's ambit to do. INEC is an election management body. They can only work within existing laws. And I think I've heard on several times that if as people we even just obeyed the laws and followed the process, we won't have as many issues as we do. But as again, the one that we would push back to INEC, for example, is PU level results. Why are those not public? Why are those not on your website? The website, I don't remember the last time I checked the level of data that's provided on there, so that we can even use the data to do analysis. So if you if you say in one local government there are 30,000 registered citizens and only 2,000 of them show up to vote, for me, that's the kind of narrative I love. So when people in that local government are whining, I'll be like, but when you sat at home on election day, was that INEC's problem? Was it INEC that held you that you did not come out to vote if 2,000 people decided who your elected representative? So those are the kinds of things that I would love to do with data if INEC made them available.
Thank you very much, Yemi. Thank you very much. And Samson, let's quickly hear from Samson. We're rounding up gradually. You're going to have a major program on TV, I think, in partnership with channels by June ending. And before then, how do you think we should go ahead? I know you've been trying to do a whole lot, trying to bring people together. You're not young to run. It was a coalition of sorts led by Yaga. Now that we are talking about certain fundamentals, because our recruitment process is very central to good governance. And the only way we can have good recruitment process is when we have good electoral laws. And this is something that is very strategic to every CS who is concerned about electioneering in Nigeria. I want you to advise on how we can go together, on this in terms of do we need to look into this electoral act, streamline it and have some specific section like issue of e-accreditation, e-collation, all election in one day. Have like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, items probably we sign on to it, just like we've been doing in terms of putting pressure, on the system. What would you advise us to do in this regard? Because for us at Center for Liberty, we are more specific, about election day, but we want to widen it. All things that happen on the day of the election, reform that can actually help to take care of that. But we know that there is the issue of even the political parties having issue of internal democracy, all sorts of things. These are part of the things that this bill is meant to take care of. Before I go to Samson, let me appreciate Ajia Aminas Zakari. She's been contributing that it's wrong to see INEC and members of political party. That was then, not anymore. Please take time to look at credentials of commissioners and rec. And she also said that electoral problems affect all of us. So working with citizens to appreciate their role is key to conduct of elections. In fact, wholesale reforms are not very necessary if only we all have a good, a change of attitude and mindset towards good democratic processes. I'm sure that Samson actually had that, and probably you also respond to that, and maybe we'll speak next. So Samson, how do we go about this coordination? Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Atoye, for hosting this. There are just too many things, and I will talk about what I consider the dilemmas that we have to grapple with. I won't talk about the dilemmas of democratic reforms, but maybe just to even highlight one is, as we engage this, we must keep at the back of our minds that for policymakers, particularly legislators, right, they will be very, very preoccupied with how an amendment confers political advantage to them or secures the victory, electoral victory in 2023 if we don't get these laws amended now. The bad news that I have is that, honestly, and maybe Mabel should take this to the DSP, to the DS. Yes, DSP. Is honestly, from where I sit, I don't see any electoral amendments by December 2020. From where I sit, I don't see us having a bill already passed by the National Assembly from where I sit. And the reasons I have advanced earlier about the recess that the National Assembly will embark on at the end of July, There are several issues within the polity. COVID-19. In fact, we were actually told by the National Assembly that by August, we'll get a clean electoral amendment bill that will be transmitted to the president. That can no longer happen because of the COVID-19. So it means if the National Assembly wants to, meet this expectation or fulfill this promise, it means the National Assembly needs to work 72 hours in 24 hours. That's one. But we need the pressure. And I'm saying this because if we risk transporting electoral reforms into 2021, then we will have a big challenge ahead of us, and it will be too much for us to manage. So we need to intensify the pressure. Therefore, conceptually, civil society and other organizations need to work together. Two, we need to have a broader view of what civil society means. So faith-based organizations, professional associations, everybody needs to be involved in this struggle. It shouldn't just be about the organizations that are leading on elections. The third point is about reframing the discourse. So I see, and I think even I see organizations make reference to passing the electoral amendment bill that was not signed by the president. There is no bill currently before the president. So let's get that right. So let's leave the president for now. The attention should be on the National Assembly and how the National Assembly can fast track this process, put the pressure on them. But one other risks that I worry about is these constitutional amendments. If we tie electoral reforms, if we tie reforms to the Electoral Act to constitutional review, it means we will not get any amendments until mid-2021 or even the end of 2021, because we know the cumbersome process of constitutional amendments. As we speak, there are still bills on constitutional amendment that are before the president, and he's not assented to them. He only assented to 5 out of 15. We know that, yes, there are some amendments. Well, we understand the context may be different. There's a very cordial relationship between the executive and the legislature. But even up till this moment, we still see bills being turned back, and the president declined assent on some of those bills. So that's something we need to keep at the back of our mind. We have to be very, very careful. Let's try as much as possible to look at amendments that only require Electoral Act amendments and not go to the Constitution before we start going to the states, getting signatures from the states. It's very, very important. It's good, but I'm just looking at what are the risks and what are the loopholes if we want to get something tangible out of this. The other point, and I want to harp on, is the role that citizens play. And I agree with Haji Amina. You can fix the laws. If you don't reset the mindset of our politicians, nothing will happen. The status quo will remain. They will continue to undermine the process because, again, political legitimacy issues. So it's important. Our politicians' mindset needs to be reformed. And that is why I think civil society needs to invest in citizens and citizens' mobilization. Will it be easy to build consensus around all the issues? The truth is no. We need to identify those issues. One of the things that we launched today, I think it will be going out today, is we're asking citizens, what are those 3 priorities for electoral reforms? Tell us, what do you think are those 3 things? We will aggregate them as a citizens' agenda. And these are things that, ways of getting citizens involved. And we've got prizes, for citizens who send videos with the best innovative ideas. Things like 10 gig worth of data. We also have Samsung phones, the S21 series phones, just to get citizens, send in their videos. And we'll air these videos on the town hall that is coming on the 30th of June on electoral reforms, and it's with Channels Television, where we bring stakeholders to debate issues around electoral reforms and the agenda that has been said. But we citizens, I think that EIE, YAGA Africa, Center for Liberty, all the organizations, both NGOs or not, we need to go to citizens. Citizens are the ones, most of us who are speaking here don't vote at elections. We only see and observe the experiences of citizens. Citizens who experience torture, who experience assault and intimidation. The citizens who are either shot and thugs beat them up, or citizens who face that difficulty in securing their PVCs, they should voice out. They are the voices we need to hear about what should be done to fix our electoral process. So we should invest. We should invest in getting, whichever approach, let's get them to talk about these issues and push the envelope. Because at the end of the day, they are the ones with the electoral value to our politicians, and not we. And I'll just end on that note.
Thank you very much, Samson. We barely have 5 minutes to go. And before we come to this, at the very end of this very interesting conversation, I'm happy that Madam Amina Zakari has been very, very of importance to us, making reasonable comments. INEC is committed. From what I could see, I think INEC is committed to this e-transmission, but she repeatedly said about issue of mindset. That technology will help us to also eliminate, from what level, from polling unit to what level, thereby, at that polling unit, people are able to monitor, are able to ensure that these results are transmitted. So in a way, technology will definitely help us to eliminate, the Nubian influence of these politicians. So maybe in just 1 or 2 minutes, there is a question hanging. Just at least it's important that we honor that question and answer it because it's been very engaging. Thank you for all you've said. If I may ask, are you saying we can afford to implement electronic voting? And in addition to that, we want Mabel to just, give us closing thoughts on all that have been said. Just 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak again. So I'll start by saying that in response to Samson's position that it's likely that we don't get anything done on the electoral reforms bill before the end of this year. I wouldn't want to think that way, and parliamentary practices all over the world now, comparative parliamentary studies, what they've been doing is that a lot of parliaments have put themselves in a position of inconvenience to accommodate more sitting times and to be able to work remotely, to be able to deliver more to their people. So I doubt that this time around, the National Assembly will take the long vacation. And without speaking for them, and I said I wouldn't like to be quoted on this, I see them that they are committed to delivering more because we all know that we've lost work time, they've lost sitting days. And there's also a constitutional requirement, for the numbers of days that they are required to sit. All of those things are things we should take into cognizance. So work is still ongoing. Work will still go on. So, and before it's time to take the recess, I know that there's still the opportunity to put in a considerable amount of work. Then he also mentioned something about tying reforms, to Electoral Act. I didn't say that we're going to tie electoral reforms to, constitutional review. I was only saying that some of the reforms that we are seeking, for them to have the bite, we also have to touch on some constitutional provisions. And because it is also being managed by the office of the DSP, it makes it easier, to drive the process. So I'm not saying that electoral reforms they have to wait for constitutional review, no. But I'm saying we just use the opportunity to tie everything together. Then on the last question you asked about whether it's difficult for us to afford electronic voting, at this period, I also didn't say that, but we know that there are so many things that are involved with electronic voting, principal among which is data. Nigerians, and you know what the situation is right now. So we're talking about how to enhance the process and make the electioneering process more transparent and credible. So we can't sit at home right now, and do that. And we're trying to work within the purview of the bill that we have introduced and the extant law. Thank you. I hope I'm not out of time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Please do send us the speech you read by the Deputy Senate President. We'd like to have it. So finally, my colleague Mariam would like to say a vote of thanks because we are off in 1 minute.
So thank you very much for your inputs, your suggestions. Thank you very much for your input, your suggestions, and your opinions. We really appreciate them, and we hope to work with you together in the future. And we at Center for Liberty would definitely put your suggestions into consideration and also work with them. And we hope for more collaborations with you in the future on electoral reform. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. We are very, very grateful. Thank you, Mabel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samson. Thank you, Yemi. Thank you, Abdul Mahmoud. And thank you to all the participants, Ajamina, Zakari, and everyone. We are very, very happy. Yemi, thank you very much. We are very grateful for sparing the time. Thank you very much. We will also be willing, to also join any of your activities. We are grateful, Samson. Thank you very much. And maybe I will definitely see one of these days. We'll come around.
I look forward to that. Bye.